All right, so we have 1 more minute to go back to the session. So before that, we would like to thank our next sponsor for seed technology session, Taki Seeds. So I would like to thank them very much. Taki Seeds has been very engaging with AXA and support all the they give sponsor support to many events also. So with that, we would like to present a video from Taki Seeds.
Using advanced technologies refined over many years, we are working to bring about a new age in agriculture. Founded in 1835, we are Taki Seed.
All right, thank you very much, Taki Seed again, and also Centaur this morning for the sponsor of this session. So I would like to welcome everyone back, and next I would like to invite back our moderator, Dr. Uma, please. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. May. Welcome, everyone. We have got two more panel members who will be sharing their insights, their thoughts on the genetic purity. So I would now like to invite our next panelist, Dr. Wilko Lichterink, right? He is the team leader, COP Innovation for KGene, right? And he has a lot of experience also as an academician and researcher. So let's hear from him. Dr. Wilko.
Okay, thank you. Let's share my screen. Okay, thanks. Thanks for the organizers of this interesting session to give me the time to talk about some novel possibilities that I see for seed purity testing. As introduced, my name is Wilko Lichterink. I used to work for 18 years for the Wageningen University, and since 2 years I'm working for KGene. So, of course, if you talk about seed purity, you talk about seed quality. And I would like to shortly remind you all, of course, that's quite obvious, but seed quality is a very important aspect of seeds. And actually the question about what is seed quality is really related to what is the function of a seed. And of course, there's let's say, the natural function, which is spreading of genes in time and space to next generation. And if you look at germination characteristics in this respect, then actually you see in general that natural seed batches germinate very ununiform and also not all at the same time. But of course, if you look at the derived functions, and then especially the propagation as propagation material in agriculture, then actually we're looking for seed batches which germinate all at the same time to 100%. So you see that there are some conflicts in what we would like to see in seed quality and what's actually the natural function of seed quality and the natural appearance of seed quality. And of course, then there's another factor, which is commodity. So in general, so I think a very good definition of seed quality is that it's the overall value of seed for its intended use. Of course, as said, seed purity is an important factor of seed quality. And then actually there are several aspects of purity. So there's the physical purity. For example, if there are broken seeds or empty seeds or even small stones within the seed batch. There's the physiological purity. So if you do seeds harvesting, there will be seeds of different maturation levels and of varying quality in the seed batch. And then, of course, there's the genetic purity that we are talking about today. So that things like trueness to type, but also seeds of undesired species and other aspects. Of course, as already nicely pointed out by the former two speakers, there are several ways in which we can test for genetic purity. There's really the morphological test, and it can be done on seeds and seedlings, but also a lot on grow-out tests. There are some chemical tests available for certain aspects of seed purity, of genetic purity. And there's the molecular markers, and that can be either proteins or enzyme based, or lately, of course, more and more, this is DNA based. So if you look a little bit more, zoom into this morphological aspect, then actually I would like to talk to you a little bit on what are how do you objectively measure morphological traits. And this is just some examples which I think a lot of you might know. If you look to the left, then you see in the middle of the figures, you see a dot. And then if you have to say, okay, which dot is smaller or which one is bigger, then you would say, okay, this one on the left really looks smaller. But actually, it's the same size as to the right. And this is actually where our mind plays tricks on us. Similar to the picture on the right, where you see a red background, and then it really looks like as if in the right upper corner, the red background is lighter than in the left down corner, but actually that's not true. That's not true. It's the same color of red, but our mind does as it has. Our mind translates this in different colors. So therefore, we actually can, if we really want to do objective measuring, phenotyping, actually machine learning and making use of digital imaging actually can be of advantages. So actually, if you talk about digital phenotyping, then that's the objective data collection from digital images to measure morphological or physiological characteristics. And actually, in such a digital phenotyping setup, there's different steps. So first, growth conditions and circumstances in which you take the pictures, of course, is important. Then the way how you take the picture. And then, of course, also how do you process the picture? So how do you recognize plants or plant parts, seeds, for example, in this case? And how do you measure traits from that recognition? And then, of course, the next step is to interlink that with other data sources, for example, from a grow out test or a genotyping data. So if you look at the way how you do your imaging, then of course there's several options. There's the RGB, the red, green, and blue, just the normal visible phenotyping, basically the normal pictures, as shown here in the upper picture of Arabidopsis seeds, in this case, at different stages of germination. And then of course you can imagine that you can use this kind of pictures to analyze germination speed. Yeah, that's also certain applications of that are available where you really can, on an semi-automatical way, measure germination of a seed batch. Then there's multi-spectral imaging, basically using not the whole visible light spectrum, but specific wavelength of the spectrum for your imaging. And actually that has been shown to be able to be used for genetic purity testing. And actually that's some example over here where you see two different batches of seeds, or actually two different wheat varieties, wheat species, sorry, where actually you see at a certain wavelength, you see completely different turnout than for the one species than for the other species. And then if you have a mix of these, you can actually select the undesired species out of that. This also shows that if you can set up genetic purity testing with image analysis, actually it can also possibly be used to actually select for seeds, clean seed batches. Then there is infrared and near-infrared imaging, as you see here in the picture, where actually at certain wavelengths, for example, you can make a picture of, for example, the carbohydrate contents of seeds. Then there's fluorescence imaging that is known, for example, in seeds to be able to look at chlorophyll presence in seeds. And you might know the more chlorophyll there's present in seeds, the less mature in general they are. And therefore also this is basically also you can use this, for example, as a physiological purity testing. And then there's X-ray. And so there's a lot of possibilities how you can make pictures of seeds And of course, the next step is doing image analysis on these pictures. So you can use filters at specific wavelengths and do object recognition. For example, here's some examples again of Arabidopsis seeds in this case on the right top corner, where you can see that you can select for example, only the seed or actually and the cotyledons, or you can select for everything but the background. That is, let's say, more the simple way of looking at image analysis, but can be very effective. But then, of course, these days also things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, or even deep learning of pictures can be used to extract features from images, which then in the end can help to make a selection and then actually to do an estimation of genetic purity of seed batches. And so these are just some examples which not always will work, but there's more and more examples where this can be used to look at seed quality and seed purity. Then I would like to spend last minutes of my presentation for the more DNA-based markers. Of course, the former speakers have very nicely introduced that part. And one important aspect of really looking at molecular markers is single nucleotide polymorphism, which in general there will be a lot of markers available, although these markers have to be identified, which markers are the best to use for genetic purity testing. And the advantage is they can adapt for high throughput analysis. And also the former speakers have shown that can be done with a real-time PCR test, but actually also it's more and more possible to do it with sequencing. Of course, there the price issue comes to mind, and in how much multiplex you can do your assays. Of course, is an important issue there. But this is something which is being used and is also in fast development. But if you look at really sequence-based genotyping, then of course you also are interested in sequencing technologies. And actually what we have seen in the last years is that there's a huge development in these areas with a lot of different platforms. And actually these platforms are capable of different things to do. And two important aspects in that is actually how much DNA can be measured in one run, and that's increasing a lot, but also how long the DNA fragments that can be measured. And maybe for genetic purity testing, that's not the most important aspect, but for example, for the things like genome assembly, that is. And actually at the moment, if you look at the apparatus that are on the market, then two important new ones, or relatively new ones, are the Sequel 2 from PacBio and actually the Promethean from Oxford Nanopore technologies. They both can do a lot of sequencing and also very long stretches of sequencing. And as said, the longer the stretches of sequence that you have, the easier you can do whole genome genome assembly. But of course also for using it for genetic purity testing in the further future. I think of course also the how many sequences you can do per run is also very important. Just to go a little bit more into this nanopore sequencing, actually different from other technologies which are on the market, which all have some type of synthesis or conversion of the DNA. The Oxford Nanopore really is in this case still a protein pore, where actually the DNA is pulled through, and while it's pulled through, it's measured what kind of bases are going through the pore, and that's in that way very direct way of sequencing. And also, so there's also developments where the protein pore is replaced by a more an artificial pore. That's also development that's going on. And actually, I think this is something which really will lead us further in the whole sequencing technology, and which I also foresee in the further future to be used the most likely platform for all different kinds of genotyping studies, among which genetic purity. Besides doing DNA, actually this technology can also do RNA. And then actually with testing RNA, you would not only be able to look for SNPs, but you also would be able to look for expression differences, which actually in the same time could tell you something about seed quality. If you know what kind of genes are highly expressed in a high quality seed batch, then actually with this technology in the future, you really could go for not only genetic purity testing, but also seed quality testing. And as said, this is something which is really still at a very infancy, because also now we don't have always a good clue of which genes should be high expressed to get a high seed quality. But that's something which both from the academic side will progress, and also from the technology sides, I see this as something for the further future. So with that, thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lichterink, for that presentation. I think you have opened up the scope a little bit more now by bringing in issues of digital phenotyping and how artificial intelligence and machine learning can come into play in putting all these things together for determination of seed quality as well as genetic purity. We will now move on to the fourth panelist for this afternoon. A very good speaker from ISTA, mainly I think because a lot of the seed industry players would be looking at what ISTA has to recommend and support for them to follow through. So let's hear from Dr. Chiara Delogu. Dr. Chiara?
Okay, nice to meet you. Now I share my presentation. Okay, do you see it? In this presentation, I talk about a short introduction to ISTA and to the ISTA rules, Chapter 8, Species and Variety Testing, and about the activities of the Variety Committee that it is responsible for the development of the method in the ISTA rules. The International Science Seed Testing Association is a science-based organization situated in Zurich, founded in 1924 with the aim of developing and publishing standard procedures in the field of seed testing. It is a government-driven, non-profit organization, legally independent from industries and third party under the Swiss law. The membership is a very international membership and composed by 230 members, laboratories, sampling entities, and so on, coming from 79 different countries. More than 130 of the member laboratories are accredited by ISTA. The mission of the association is to promote research in all areas of seed science and technologies, and to develop, adopt, and publish standards procedures for sampling and testing seeds, and to promote, this is very important, their uniform adoption in seed moving across the international trade. ISTA rules are the internationally recognized standards for seed testing and sampling, and they are constantly updated thanks to the activities of the technical committee. They are recommended for national and international trade by many regulations and international systems such as the OECD certification scheme, European Union regulation, and also by many national seed laws. The variety committee is responsible for the developing of for the chapter 8 species and variety testing, and on the left you can find the composition of this committee chaired by Dr. Ana Laura Vicario from Argentina. The object of chapter of species and variety testing in the ISTA rules is to determine the extent that the submitted sample conforms to the species or varieties as requested by the applicant, using methods not permissible in a purity test according to chapter 3, sorry, that deals with basic tests. In this case, we are looking for the genetic quality of the lot of the seed lot, varietal identity and purity. For the variety testing, it is needed that the variety is stated by the applicant. An authentic standard sample of the variety is available, and the methods of identification are used in a comparative manner whatever type of trait is used, be it morphological, genetic, or cytological. The tools may be different, field trial-based test on morphological characters mutuated by the use of protocols, but this kind of test could be very expensive, time-consuming, and not suitable for a prompt response that is needed for trading. The rules include also biochemical markers, seed proteins, SDH page, and isoelectrofocusing, but this kind of marker shows a low level of polymorphism over the years, and so it could be sometimes difficult to identify the varieties. Now we are use also DNA, but a new kind of marker, the DNA-based methods are coming now, and SSR markers, but also SNPs and specific trait markers can be used because of their great number, highly polymorphic, and also amenable to databasing, and in this case, they can facilitate also the exchange of information between laboratories. For this reason, the activities of the variety committees in the last years was focused on this kind of marker, and this conduct to an addition of a new section in chapter 8, DNA-based methods, with a new definition and terms and definition, and also a new the introduction of new accreditation systems, the semi-performance based approach. This work conducted to the introduction of two methods for variety verification, one for triticum in 2017 and one for corn in 2018, based on SSR markers. What is a semi-performance based approach? In this case, the laboratories can use its in-house validated methodology, including the DNA extraction, PCR protocol, and data collection, if they can demonstrate that these procedures are fit for purpose. But one common marker set is prescribed by ISTA, and in addition, laboratories will be free to add as many markers of the same type as they need, and ISTA can also suggest a second set of molecular markers aiming to improve the discrimination power of the method. At the moment, two new methods are under validation, and two comparative tests are running for Ordeum, Pisum, and OT using SSR markers, and we hope to introduce this kind of methodology in the next few years in the ISTA rules. Another project is now running for the detection of annual ryegrass in perennial ryegrass seeds. At the moment, the seedling root fluorescence is could be assessed could be used to assess annual ryegrass in perennial ryegrass seeds. But sometimes this kind of technology of methods overestimates the amount of annual ryegrass in a seed mixture. So according to the UPOF Model 1 that allow the use of molecular marker if it is possible to demonstrate the strict linkage to the morphological characters, in 2018, the Variety Committee tested the marker for the determination of annual ryegrass in perennial ryegrass. The data coming from the grow out test and the laboratory test results are not completely in accordance, probably due to a partial linkage between the genetic markers and the morphological markers. And the estimates vary depending upon which variety are used as calibrator in the PCR. Now, ISTA is working on a new group of markers most tightly linked to the annual characters, and this project is directly financed by ISTA Secretariat. Another task very important is the setting up of a proficiency test programs, and in collaboration with the accreditation department, a first proficiency test is in preparation and will be launched in the next time. The proficiency test program is a pillar for the accreditation of the laboratory because this kind of test give the possibility to the lab to developing their testing capacity for varietal testing, in this case using molecular markers, and also evaluate the reproducibility of results provided by the laboratory, and also evaluate gives the tool to evaluate the performance of the laboratories in the framework of accreditation of reaccreditation process. The Variety Committee also collaborate with ISTA Secretariat in the set up also a collaboration with the other international organizations that are interested in variety testing and in the use of molecular marker. The last meeting among ISTA, OECD, and UPON and DAOSA was held in Hyderabad in 2019, and some proposal and further action came out. First one is carry out. A first step was carry out a joint inventory by ISTA, UPOV, OECD, EAOSA on the use of this technique, crop by crop, and also a development of a common list of terms definition in the aim of harmonizations. A first step was done, and UPOV codes from GENI database were included in the 7th edition of the ISTA list of stabilized plant name. Thank you for your attention, and also an acknowledgement to all the ISTA colleagues that helped me to support the work and to this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chiara, for that presentation. I think you also brought out some very important issues And it seems like ISTA is also seriously looking into sort of moving from GOT to marker-related technologies, right? I think everyone will agree that technology is becoming more and more important. And what is important is to see how this technology can be adopted and harmonized for the benefit of the industry. We have heard from all the 4 panelists. I think now we will move on to the panel discussion. So can we stop the slide share and have the videos of all the 4 panelists, please? Okay, so we have 3. Where is Dr. Tanabe? All right, everybody is here. Good, okay. Right, I am also looking at some of the questions that have been posed, right? And while we get into the question, not that many yet, hoping that the questions will pour in, but I would like to start. I think this is relevant to all 4 panelists. I'm going to start off by asking this question, and each of you may be answering in respect to your own scope, right? On a score of 1 to 10, right? What would be your take? Where are we between GOT, the grow out test, and the molecular marker techniques? Right, so maybe I will start off with Dr. Tanabe. What do you think of this?
Excuse me.
You have unmuted yourself.
Okay. I'm sorry. At first, it's difficult to hear your question. Please, one more time.
Okay. No. What we were talking today is generally we are talking about the grow out test being the conventional method, and we are moving towards the DNA marker technology. So as where we stand today, where are we on a scale of 1 to 10? How far are we between the GOT and the marker-based technology? Each panelist may have a different perspective on this, but let's hear.
It's difficult. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I cannot answer the degree, the progress. I'm sorry.
Okay, let's hear from maybe Mr. Purna. You've done a lot of R&D on this subject.
Yeah, I mean, basis my experience within field crops, I can say somewhere around 4 to 5, because if I see overall industry, not all the companies are following the molecular techniques, and some are still following the traditional conventional growouts. So I can say somewhere between 4 to 5.
4 to 5 is a very good number. Dr. Lichterink, you have comments on that.
Well, of course. So basically, from the let's say the really practical applications of seed purity testing, I'm not so much informed, but for sure, I think there is. Let's put it this: I think it's moving from 1 to 10. So and I can imagine indeed that that's around 4 or 5 is a very good number for this moment, but I foresee it will move more towards 10 in the coming years. But of course, that also depends on the developments that will go on, and for sure also the legislation, I think, is an important aspect there. And I think also the comparison between small seed companies and the bigger seed companies, of course, that depends on how much can be implemented of new technologies. So that would be my addition.
Okay. Yeah, I think what I was trying to fish from the panelists also is how robust is the move towards, moving, or how much are the industries actually doing in terms of trying to develop the marker-based techniques. Let me go to Dr. Chiara, if you want to get back to that question and tell me.
Yes. From the point of view, from the technical point of view of ISTA, we move mainly in molecular and laboratory tests because of we control the seed lot, and so we need to have a very quick response in terms for seed trading. And in our approach, we always use to verify the variety identification and purity, the standard samples of the varieties. And so we have a very robust terms of comparison, and we can give a result. Is a quite different perspective from people that check the productivity of its seed lot. We control the seed lots after the commercialized seed lots. So we have we control the purity and the identity after the production, and we use a sample of reference samples of the variety. So we mainly use laboratory tests. We are requested for laboratory tests mainly in our experience. We focus it on this kind of test, our activity.
Right.
Perhaps Mr. Andreas Weiss may.
Professor Omar, if I can interfere a little bit and give some more information from a regulatory perspective. If you go on certified seeds, and I saw that question also in one of the questions and from the panel, on OECD certified seeds, it is still the field inspection which is the important part here. There were a lot of discussion in the OECD seed schemes about this, and ISTA participated in there, and there are a number of designated authorities, national designated authorities, who use BMT tests and molecular markers as well. Also, ISTA methods are very widely used by them, but it's only as supporting information. The primary information in the moment are still on an OECD certified seed coming from the field inspection area. Which is a shame, as Dr. Logu also mentioned, because we can do for seed which are on the market probably a good job on the ISTA method and with DNA markers. And there I would agree with Dr. Rao to say 4 to 5, yes, but unfortunately for certified seed, we are closer to 1.
Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's been very insightful into what's happening. While looking at some of the questions here, I think a few attendees have asked in relation to cost of using the DNA marker technologies. So maybe Mr. Purna, you want to address on the cost matter?
Actually, cost, when it comes to cost, growths are really cheap, right? So, but only thing is it's time consuming. When it comes to the DNA testing or the markers testing, I mean, from my experience, I will give you a ballpark number. My grow test will cost me around anywhere between $10 to $20, whereas a DNA PCR test for me it costs somewhere around $60 to $80 per test for a seed batch. So again, sorry, it involves the robustness of the testing, what we are trying to do, how we are trying to do. And earlier, with my previous experience, if I have to do an isozyme gel electrophoresis test, it is costing me somewhere around $40 to $50 per test. So the cost varies depending upon the method what we choose. And when we go to the latest technology, the PCR, real-time PCR DNA technology, so the cost is a little bit on a higher side. But what we need to see here is when it finally how it is being calculated per kg of seed, whatever we are producing. So we calculate to that and then take the right call in terms of how do we use this technology part.
Right, thank you. There's another question here in relation to the testing as well. Do we have a centralized lab wherein we can send our samples and get it tested? If yes, will the test results be accepted across organizations? So there's two issues here. One, if somebody would like to send out their samples for testing, is there a centralized test available? And will it be accepted across organizations? Dr. Chiara, maybe that's a question for you.
Yes. Yes. In the semi-performance based approach, ISTA choose to have a common set of markers that is available and used by all the laboratories ISTA accredited for setting for give the results. And so there is a common description for the varieties. About the acceptance of this kind of test is, as said before by Andreas Weiss, OECD give some, it is possible, the only kind of test that can be accepted are those that are or included in general in an official protocols, or also, but there is also it is grow out a discussion about this kind of test and their acceptance. Only the field test is the main test, and you can use this kind of internationally validated test only to solve some particular situation. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm
Maybe
quite clear.
Yeah, maybe I can add from the ISTA side that there are in the moment only 3 accredited laboratories worldwide who accredited for this. So it's an upcoming thing, and the more it will be accepted by the authorities, and the more labs will be getting ISTA accreditation. And this will, of course, then be part of the ISTA Orange certificates for international trade, which means that everything would be accepted. That is also what is happening in the moment. The tests which are done in these 3 laboratories, including the sampling, of course, which has to be done following ISTA rules as well, will be mentioned in the ISTA Orange international certificates. So they are accepted for what is there in the moment. Unfortunately, on the political side, there has to be a more move to go into these areas and move away from the field inspection side, also allowing these techniques in future. I think that is something where the industry needs to support ISTA in that case.
Thank you very much. 3 is a very good start. I don't know if you would be able to mention those 3 companies for the benefit of the audience. And secondly, in terms of the types of seeds where this sort of testing is available, I think would also be very helpful to the audience, Dr. Andreas.
At the moment, yes.
Okay.
At the moment, the method included in the ISTA rules are for wheat and corn, and in the future will be available test for pea, oat, and barley. Because we are running now the comparative test, the second round, and it will be finished in the next month. And so we hope to include this kind of test quite rapidly in the ISTA rules.
Right, thank you for that answer. Perhaps a question to Dr. Tanabe. You know, there is this explosion of new varieties, new hybrids with all the advancement in breeding. And will this influence the type of markers? Are we able to develop markers fast enough to match the development from the breeder side in new varieties and so on?
It depends on the crop. We are mainly test the hybridity test. So the available marker, we have a new crop. I'm sorry. We can use already have the marker. So in this time, we are quickly can test. However, new almost new variety, we need the development the DNA marker. So in Sakata, just a moment. Many DNA marker used for quality control developed during breeding processes in the R&D department. So some DNA markers developed. These markers were used. We can use quickly. However, some crops we need the developed in our quality management department. So this type of crop, it takes time. Okay.
Okay, right. I'll move on to some of the questions in the chat box. Yeah, this is a question from Dr. Sumitra. In case of DNA marker using TechMan, how many markers should we use per variety? So I think maybe either Mr. Purna, are you able to address this? How many markers should we use per variety?
Per variety, basically, it depends again upon the markers separation of the information what it can give us, right? So if it is, I can tell about what I can see in the hybrid scenario. We typically use 8 to 12 markers using the real-time PCR. So among these 8 to 12 markers over a genotype for all the materials what we handle, we try to see how much informative markers that will it will come. So if I am getting more than 5 to 6 informative markers from these 12 markers, whatever I have selected, that's how robust it will be the markers whatever we select. And yeah, I mean, minimum 8 to 12 will be ideal in case of field crops like corn or cotton. That will be a good one to go ahead.
Okay, we'll move out of the marker for a little while. There's a very specific question to Dr. Wilko. Perhaps you have read the question in the chat box. Could you please explore a bit more on legislation and how this will impact on the adoption speed? I think this is in relation to the first question that was asked on a scale of 1 to 10, what's happening, and yeah, if you could explore.
Yes. No, I think for sure. So, but basically, I think what was also addressed before from by Andreas and Kaya, that of course, if a new technology is developed and then it takes some time to be able to implement that. So robustness, of course, is an important aspect that needs to be looked at. And then, of course, if that is all checked, then actually, of course, the legislation needs to be adapted. And so what was Andreas was telling that at this moment, certified seeds still almost always need a grow out test. And that just takes time to change that. And that's what I meant with that legislation also has an influence on how fast new technologies can be implemented. Which is, of course, it's always a balance between be sure to have a robust test and wanting to do some cool new stuff. But of course, it takes time to implement that. That's I think it's yeah, that's always the case, and that's also should be to a certain extent for sure, to make sure that when something is used for certified seeds, of course, it needs to be very robust and it needs to be proven that it works accordingly.
Right, I think many of the speakers are very concerned about cost right from the beginning. That has appeared multiple times. There are a few questions here that are linked. Are the speakers aware on the discussion on digital sequence information and the possible payment for that? What implications will this have on the process of implementation? Who can take this one and provide an insight into that? Dr. Chiara, perhaps?
I think that it's very important that this kind of description, molecular description, will be included also in the variety listing. And when you list a variety and among the morphological characteristics, you can include also a molecular or biochemical profile, then the data is more robust, because this kind of test is these characters compare among all the characteristics of the varieties. But this kind of data are very sensible, and sometimes I think that there is a very big attention to spread the molecular data. Most attention that on morphological ones. So also in the CPVO, and there are also a lot of regulation about the diffusion of the molecular data. They are considered very, very sensible, and they can spread only with the consensus of the breeder, not in another way. Okay, I don't know if I have answered to the question.
Well, let's see. I think for now that seems to be a reasonable response to the question. Well, there's another one here. Would you recommend different sample numbers using a PCR-based approach and a field GOT, since there is a cost difference with accuracy? Is more with the PCR approach. How do you determine this sample number? Is there a standardization from ISTA? Yeah, I guess this question again is for Dr. Chiara. I think some were covered in your presentation, but perhaps you want to give a short response specific to this question.
Yes, for the variety identification, we use a different seed number if you want verified identity or the purity test. And we have tables that gives interval of confidence between about to give robustness to the results. And if you want to test for variety purity, you have to test at least 100 single seeds. Okay, and if you want to test only for identity, you can test a less number of the seeds, and also pooled seeds to compare the to increase the precision of your results. But in any case, you have to use always the sample standard of the varieties, because sometimes the homogeneity of the molecular markers are not the same that the morphological ones, and so you must have a precise photography of the genetic background of the varieties. And so the pillar for the variety identification is more seeds for purity test, at least 100 seeds, less seeds for the identity test, but always you have to use the reference standards of the samples to take in account a possible variability within the varieties about dealing with this kind of markers. You have to be very, very you have to use always the reference standard sample of the varieties for to verify the identity or purity of seed lots.
Right. I think one other issue that may be very important to discuss for today is in relation to skill. Right. So if you are looking at the grow-out test, what level of skill is required in comparison to the DNA markers? And it also relates to the question here, how long will it take to train the people who will do the DNA testing? In fact, I think Dr. Frisco Malaban is recommending APSA to sponsor a training program. APSA is here, they are reading, so they will pick up on that. But let's talk a bit on the skills, right? What kind of skill is required? Right, Dr. Wilko, maybe you want to start this off? I think that one I will go to every panelist actually.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, I think, of course, one important skill, of course, is really basically molecular lab skills. General molecular lab skills, I think, are important. Of course, said that, it also depends, I think, on which scale as a company you can do your molecular testing. At the point that you have a molecular lab and are able to do also actually implement some robotics in that, of course, let's say that will bring other skills. But I think the most important is general molecular biological lab skills will be needed to perform the molecular tests. And then on which level, let's say, that I think depends a lot on how you will be able as a company to implement molecular markers. Will that be just a very small molecular lab, or do we have a company of a bigger size where you can have a bigger molecular lab and also more robotics involved? So, but of course that depends a lot on the different, the size of the companies, I think.
Size of the company, okay. Mr. Purna, what's your take on the skill?
I mean, both. I mean, it requires a different type of skill sets, as Mr. Wilko was telling, right? For the DNA testing or the molecular testing, the skill sets are totally different. You need a person who understands the biotechnology or the DNA technology part, and then able to interpret those results. But when it comes to the grow test, it is more from the morphological evaluation perspective. So he should be knowing the crops very well, and the dust characters or whatever the distinguishable characters are there for that particular variety or for that particular hybrid has to be known. So for which he should be having that skill set of evaluating the crops at the field level. So both the skill sets are different, and it needs a little bit of time to understand the crop when it comes to the field GOTs, and for the technical part of a molecular test, it needs a lab training in terms of handling those and also doing those evaluations. So it needs some amount of different skill sets and also time, considerable time.
Right. Before I move to the next panelist, I just want to ask Mr. Purna this. Yeah, if marker result is good, do we still need to do GOT?
Yeah, I mean, basically what we try to do is we validate our markers with the grow out performance. And once that validations has been completed, we continue to use, depend on the markers test results. Unless and until if there is a variation that is being observed in the results, or some sort of periodical proficiency testing or checks has to be done. So apart from that, once it is established, we can totally rely on the markers.
Right, thank you. Dr. Chiara.
Yes, I can add something about the skills, and they are those that are necessary in a molecular lab, but they can quite different between the labs, also in relation to the equipment that is available. For ISTA, it's very important to check the skills of the people of the laboratory, and for this reason, we as a variety committee, we have set up a first proficiency test round to check and to allow to the laboratory to grow in this kind of test. And I think that the ISTA accreditation could be a very important, very useful tool to increase the ability of the laboratory to use this kind of test in the framework of accreditation systems.
Right, thank you. Dr. Tanabe, would you like to add to that skill matter?
For grow-out test, it needs to know the trait of crop. But I think DNA test is basically easy for conventional PCR method. So we began to do few weeks during the few week training. So for DNA skill is very few, I think. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much to all the
Maybe
panelists.
Uma, I can add at one point here as well when it comes to training. Of course, ISTA is offering workshops, and maybe some of you heard during the last weeks that there was a document signed between APSA and ISTA, a memorandum of understanding to collaborate also in these areas. And I think that could be a nice project for us to be discussed in future as well, to have a common workshop on these type of things. Of course, I'm stepping too far out. May should comment on that one as well, but she also signed up for the panel in a moment, and Manish as well. So maybe that could be something where we are working on in very future.
Definitely, that would go under our collaboration for sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Andreas, for emphasizing this. And of course, after this session, all the suggestions from the floor, we will have our committee, CTech committee, have a look again. And because this program, if we collaborate together, that would be under the guidance also from the CTech committee.
Right. I think that's all the time that we have for the panel discussion today. Just keep your questions coming. I think it will be picked up by the APSA Secretariat, and it will be published in the session summary by APSA in December. Okay. Thank you very much again. I would like to pass the session back to APSA Secretariat for the closing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Uma, and I would like to thank all the speakers, Dr. Kira, Dr. Tanabe, Dr. Wilko, and Mr. Poner for giving such a very inclusive information, and it's so practical view actually that you have given and updated to our members. There are so many questions that we have received from our members, from participants, but for sure, we will share and discuss and share back to all speakers. And we very much appreciate it if you can help us to guide the answer, and then we will incorporate in the summary report. So next, I would like to invite our co-chair, Dr. Manish Patel, to give a session summary and close the session. Dr. Manish Patel, please.
Thank you, Dr. May. It was a very high-level brainstorm on the topics, and I really appreciate the participants and also the speakers from each of the field, because as a co-chair of CTech committee, I think the purpose of this session was to understand where we as an industry stands on genetic purity, what kind of different methods we use, and what are the challenges in each of the methods, and also its pros and cons, and what should be the basically regulatory mechanisms in order to bring harmony across the region. So I think going through all the presentation and also interesting question answer sessions, I have made a couple of takeaway message which I would like to share here with the audience, and maybe at the end I will just try to conclude in 2-3 lines the final way forwards for this particular topics. So if we start with the first speaker, where I think the key takeaway message, which is mainly from vegetable sector, we chosen Sakata as a leading vegetable players, and they have been already using molecular markers for routine genetic purity. And I think one of the takeaway message from that presentation is like, the most important question you need to ask yourself, that why do you want the genetic purity test? What is your objective? And what is your priority? And also you have to look at which crop you are doing and what kind of cost is involved and the profit is there. Based on that, you should make a smart decision which methods to be used, either GOT or maybe the biochemicals. And we all knew, means in this presentations, I think all the available options and methods have been disclosed, and we all knew it also, but normally it's always a question for for any company, what method will be the best. And I think from this presentation, it's very clear that let company decide by itself which method will be the perfectly suit with their given situation. And especially, you know, sometime as a seed company, when you go to sell the seeds, no doubt you are selling a kind of a DNA package to the farmers. But we have to think also like a farmers, because farmer is not buying DNA package basically. Farmer is buying a bunch of phenotypic traits which they like. And that's why, you know, the GOT, the field grow out is getting more popular, because that's where you are really confirming the typical traits of your genetics, which farmers likes. And for that, you know, farmer is paying actually. So while conducting any you know, methods within the company, I think these are the very important to understand why this method has to be used. And for that, it should be justification in terms of cost, in terms of accuracy, in terms of precision. And based on that, I think that decision has to be made. Coming back to the second speaker of Syngenta, I think the most important message what Syngenta has given is about, you know, developing internal revalidation systems. Because as a science, I think it's very clear that different methods are leading to the purity test. But then finally, as I said, what farmers are buying is a bunch of phenotypical traits, and they really don't understand the DNA. They understand the phenotypes. And for that, I think enough revalidation method has to be developed within the company, like what Syngenta has developed kind of a statistic model to revalidate the founded SNP markers. And once you know you have enough revalidations, then only you should switch on to this kind of novel technology. And no doubt, the cost-wise, it's always a challenge to compare. And I don't say that it's at all comparable with a GOT and DNA-based or lab-based methods, because they are completely different affairs. But yes, as an industry, when we are growing so fast and we have a huge supply chain pressure, then definitely we have to find out some systems which can deliver quick and more efficient and more accurate results. And that's why if you do this kind of things, starting from your R&D, then it's more justifiable and doable. So one of the message coming, and what I understood from Syngenta presentation is like, if you are really looking forwards to start some molecular based techniques for your genetic purity, then make sure that you have that set up in your R&D as well. And the kind of genetics which you are developing, you are using the same platforms, then it's more easy to start and more, I would say, reliable. Otherwise, if you are already using conventional method of breeding, developing some genotypes and selling in the market, and now you are trying to use some molecular platforms to check the quality, you may end up with some surprise. So better to you know, start investing into your R&D, and from where you have to start looking at the markers, and that will make your you know, life easy, and also it will bring more accuracy and precision in your quality operations. And then after the third presentation, which was mainly from PGen, and our expectation was, you know, kind of academic contribution to this session. And I think it went very well. All latest technology, which still, you know, personally, I feel the speed of invention within biotech sector is extremely high as compared to speed of regulatory systems in the country or in the region. So here in these presentations, we understood the latest concept of image analysis, phenotyping, which is possible, digital phenotyping using some softwares, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep machine learning, and these all tools are really, you know, going towards very high-tech analysis of seed quality. And it's not only about genetic purity, it's also about many other aspects of seed quality, and that's very much possible. And but if you look at the industry, then I think you know, regulatory systems again comes in a picture, because when you sell any seeds in the market, you are supposed to meet the standards mentioned in the seed level. And seed level still, and the Seed Act in most of the countries are still validating the field grow out test. And that's where I think as an industry, we are you know, limiting ourselves. And that's where I think the role of APSA also start to, and not only APSA, but also the ISTA together to make sure that the regulatory system is also getting upgraded as per the advancement happening in the R&D. And if we are unable to do it, then maybe it will be a mismatch in the long run. So it's a time to really start taking a lead in this direction. And then finally, we had a speaker from ISTA, and that was again very informative in terms of what is accepted at international level and what is not accepted, and where does ISTA stands in terms of all these molecular techniques. And no doubt, it's very clear there are 3 different ways of doing testing, and that's already prescribed in ISTA. Field GOT is there, but that's not being conducted in lab. So I don't think that falls under ISTA scope. But when it comes to protein and DNA, those are the already described protocols and the standards within ISTA for some crops. And that information was, I think, quite useful for the members here in the audience. So in a nutshell, looking to all different options available, it's always a big question, which one will suit to our methods. And if you have to really sell any product in the market where you think you want to achieve 100% genetic purity and you want to deliver 100% genetic pure seeds to your client or customers, then only one option left is to test each and every seeds. And if you do it, nothing will be left actually. For that, we have to really understand and develop a system within the company where we can control not only laboratory part, but also the production parts from where actually genetic quality journey starts. And if you have a full confidence on your materials coming to your lab as a sample, then you can start implying all these different techniques based on your cost economics and also your accuracy and precision requirement. And then you can really deliver a best quality material in the market. So to my opinion, on the shelf, a lot of options are available, and it's up to the seed company looking to their backgrounds, whether do they have any molecular lab, whether do have any molecular HR peoples on the board, and based on that, they can really take a call. Since one of the question was also highlighting very clearly that finding a correlation between your lab results and the field GOT is always a challenge. And that's where I also personally felt it's only possible to correlate 100% when you really find markers for each and every phenotypical traits and you use those markers in conducting your lab-based test. But that is impractical and that's not practically possible. So I think somewhere we have to compromise and we have to control the systems in order to make a justification of the selected markers and also to justify the cost, because cost is also a bit concern when it comes to a purity test. And within Asia, I think it's always a sensitive matter. So while doing a selection of any methods or any protocols, I think the key points need to be considered is the objective of the test, why you want to do it. Second, what is affordable. Third, how it's reliable. Fourth, what is the efficiency you will get. And fifth is the repeatability. If you are unable to prove it again on the reference sample, then there is no way you can go with that kind of test. So if we consider all these factors while making a decisions, then I think it will be fruitful and successful for the industry, and we will be able to deliver the quality seeds to the farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manish. That's very nice summary, and you give all the key highlights cover so well from all the speakers. So next, now the virtual networking lounge is already started. So today we have 4 tables available. So of course, for the attendees, if you wish to ask more questions also to our seed technology committee, they will be available at the table also. So another topic, of course, is that Dr. Andreas will be available also at the table, and Dr. Florina Balada, who is the head of the accreditation system of ISTA, will be available to answer all the questions you ask. And also 2 more tables that from the International Trade and Quarantine section, which are OECD seed scheme. Mr. Shaba will be there, and World Benchmarking Alliance or Access to Seed Index. So make sure you use this opportunity to interact directly among yourself and also with all the experts. With that, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Johan, the chair of Seed Technology, Dr. Uma Rani, the moderator, and also she is the member of Seed Technology, Dr. Manish Patel, co-chair of Seed Technology Committee, and Dr. Jagadish, a member of Seed Technology Committee. Thank you. With that, I would like to close the session and make sure everyone also access to the virtual networking section. Thank you. Take care and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.